This is MJ. I love comics, and right now I want to talk about. Actually, I'm going to be a little. What is it? Transparent? Yeah, the opposite of opaque. I tried doing this review earlier, and I just couldn't do it. I sucked. I sucked hard. I failed, but I'm back, and I've decided that I'm going to do a rant instead. A rant and some reflections on A Marvelous Life, the Danny Fingeroth penned biography of Stan Lee. Probably the most impactful thing about this book, in my opinion, is that it painted Lee as neither a saint nor the demon some think he is, and he did a really good job of putting him in context. I'm not sure I know the man, and I'm not sure how much of him was his persona in the end, but there definitely was some of the character that Stan built up for himself in the the soapboxes and the bullpen, in the letters pages, all that stuff. His public appearances on TV, on the radio, and interviews, whatever. Like, I don't know that was all Stan Lee, but it may have been a decent part of him, and it's interesting. And I mean, really, the public aspects of himself that he presented are, to some extent, the more important ones. The reason I would say that is because, the true character of a person does matter, and what shows from a person when they're at their worst or whatever, those are important things. But I think there's also a lot of importance on the aspects of oneself that you try to put out there. And for the most part, he tried to be a good guy and tried to put out good vibes, so to speak. But there were imperfections in him. There was a lot of things that he did wrong. And I have to say, the most surprising thing to me was how truthful the book was towards the end about his contributions to certain characters. He claims he had claimed throughout his life, through much of his career, rather, that he was the creator of Spider-Man and the X-Men and, the Fantastic Four and all these other things. But really, those were collaborative works, and in depositions and things like that, he kind of presents his opinion on why he can claim such great ownership in being the one to have created these characters. He's basically said, I'm the one who came up with the idea, therefore they're my creations. Somebody had to draw it, yeah, but that's just a side factor, and that doesn't stop it being true, or that doesn't change the fact that I'm the one who drew these, or not who drew, but who came up with these ideas. And if I'd never come up with them, Jack, Steve, whoever wouldn't have been able to draw them and make these characters. And I think that's an interesting perspective, and it's not something that I reject out of hand. I think there's a lot of people who would. Like I said, there's some people who have vilified and demonized the man for what he did to his fellow comics creators. But I don't know. I'm not sure that Marvel would have been the company it was, that it would have lasted for as long as it would have, or as it did, without Stan Lee. And really, I would say the best thing that it did, the book overall, was that it really gave me an appreciation for Jack Kirby, for Steve Ditko, for Joe Simon, for a lot of these other creators who did such great work on these comics. And there are other guys, but it's been about a week since I listened to the book, so I can't quite remember everybody in detail. But it was really fascinating to me just how much work went into the books that wasn't Lee's own. He did come up with these ideas, but and I've heard the Marvel method described, and it sounds like a mess to me, that you would have an artist give a synopsis or a writer give a synopsis for a story, and then have a artist just kind of plan it out on his own, draw everything, and then have the writer come in and I want to know who draws the word bubbles. Is that the writer, or does the artist provide room for those, or what happens? Anyway, I don't know. But then the writer comes in and puts the dialogue in, or at least writes up the dialogue for what's going on in the panels, and that just seems like such a mess. It seems like such a sloppy way to do things. But at the same time, I guess if you're giving credit due to people for the work that they've done, it really can be an effective method because it allows the artists to flex their muscles, to be very creative, to be storytellers who are telling, well, stories in a visual medium and through, you know, panel progression and things like that. It allows them to tell the stories in a different way that it's not superior or inferior, it's just different, and I think it produces different types of results. And I think the fact that we're still talking about Marvel, I think is this 75 years later? Anyway, I think the fact that we're talking about Marvel all these decades later is kind of proof of the power or the impact that the work of those artists, it's proof of the work of their artists. It's proof of how good the work of those artists was, and it's also, I think it has something to do with the method that was used, and then also the ideas and the words, the dialogue, and the ethos that was injected by Lee. Now, I'm still a relative noob to like all the 60s Marvel stuff, but I am working my way through that, and knowing the method that they used for the stories or for, you know, making the comics, it makes me more interested in it makes me want to have a different perspective, or make sure to be mindful to take a different perspective as I'm reading and reviewing the comics from here on out. So that's it's interesting. I don't think I've read a Marvel comic since I listened to the book. Yeah, that's correct. So it'll be interesting to go back. And I may even go back to issue number 1, because something that was mentioned in the book was that Lee gave a very short, like couple paragraph synopsis of what was going to happen in issue 1 of the Fantastic Four, and like 1 or 2 sentences got turned into the first 9 pages of the book by Kirby, where he gives these really interesting and dynamic, I think, character introductions. They're very moody, is what I would really say. Not so much dynamic, but moody. Introductions to each of the 4 characters of the Fantastic Four. And then, I don't remember who detailed the origin. Was it Lee or was it Kirby? I don't know, but then, then we get that. And then the final third of the book, I think, is them on Monster Island, I was going to say penetrating, but that's not right. Going into Monster Island and then leaving it. What's the other word that I mean? Not penetrating. And it doesn't matter. But I'm interested to hear that. And something else that interested me was in the book. I think it was in the book, although I did just watch a documentary on comics as well, so it could have been from that. There was a claim made that like maybe Kirby wasn't super interested in the Fantastic Four, and there are other books out at the same time that don't look as great. But I mean, then again, if that was from the book, it could have been Fingeroth, who was like a friend of Lee. Who was a younger man. I mean, he's still alive today, but I think he came into comics, as somebody who appreciated Stan Lee and Marvel, and like he was a fan who became a creator. And you got to be careful about that. His perspective could definitely be skewed. But anyway, there was, I got distracted. The claim that I believe was from the book is that Kirby's work in other books from Marvel that month, that would have been worked on at the same time as Fantastic Four #1, were better. The art was better, it was cleaner, and that, maybe he didn't care so much, and he just kind of did it on a whim and gave, partial effort, not a full effort. And, it's interesting that happened, and despite that it was still successful. And I wonder if that's Fingeroth trying to, because he gives such I think, an honest and fair assessment of Stan Lee's faults and his refusal to give full credit to his co-creators. I wonder if because he did that in the as a large part of the book, because I do think it's a large part of the book, he had to jab at at Kirby a little there. I don't know. It's interesting. But I really enjoyed the book. I suggest that if you want to know more about the history of Marvel, you check this out. Of course, you get to know some stuff about Stan Lee personally. There were some things that I didn't know that really were surprising to me. Interesting guy, interesting life he led, and also I think it really touched on a lot of the other comics creators who he overshadowed or who ended up in his shadow and who didn't deserve to be there and who deserved more of a spotlight. It definitely gave me more of an appreciation for Jack Kirby, for Steve Ditko as well, and these are people I'd like to learn more about. And I think that probably the best thing from this book is that it brought Lee down a peg and it lifted these other guys up. Anyway, thanks for sticking with me. Check out mgmunoz.com for more of my work. I'm an aspiring author who will gladly accept your financial support through Ko-fi, or you can buy merch from my Redbubble store. Swinging Through Comics can be found on YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and mgmunoz.com/STC. Relevant links are in the show notes. If you had a good time, like and share this, subscribe, ring that bell to catch me next time I'm Swinging Through Comics.